I'd like to welcome everybody to Southbridge Town Hall for a public hearing. At this time, I recognize the Southbridge Town Manager to read the transcript.
Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the Southbridge Town Council Joint Southbridge Planning Board public hearing in accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 5. The Southbridge Town Council and the Southbridge Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, April 16th, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. here in the McKinnon Council Chambers, Southbridge Town Hall, 41 Elm Street, Southbridge, Massachusetts. The purpose of the public hearing is to receive public comment and consider adding to the Southbridge zoning bylaw, Section 8.10, accessory dwelling units. A copy of this proposed bylaw change could be inspected at the Town Manager's office from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Wednesday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Thursday, 8 a.m. through noon on Fridays. Any person interested or wishing to be heard should appear at this time and place. Designated Scott Lazo, Chairman, Southbridge Town Council, David Payer, Chair of the Southbridge Planning Board. Notice was posted in accordance on the Stonebridge Press on March 20th, 2025, March 27th, 2025. I'll turn this over to Council Chairman.
Thank you. At this time, we'd like to open it up to the public for if there's any comment, and then I'll turn it over to the Planning Board. I'd like to welcome the Planning Board and the councilors tonight on the public hearing. Are there any citizens that would like to address the Planning Board and the council? There is nobody. At this time, I'll open it up to the Planning Board and the councilors. Any questions or statements? Councilor Shinya.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if we or if somebody wants to make a suggested change of adding something or having something removed, will that happen during a public hearing or when it goes to the council for 3 readings?
It can happen either way. The suggestion can happen at the hearing, and it will produce information, and the council would have to amend it on the floor.
Okay. So I will propose that we strike out where it says only ADUs may not be used for short-term rentals, as such term is defined by general law, Chapter 664G1, or otherwise rented for a period shorter than 31 days. And I'd like to make a suggestion that we strike that section of the bylaw out. So do we need it as a motion?
If you'd like to make, no, this is a hearing. We don't vote at a hearing.
Right.
I've never voted at a hearing before.
Okay. So I'll bring that
Suggestion,
motion up.
Jack, do you have the exact?
Yes, I have that he
Okay.
proposes.
And then a question.
Any discussion on the proposal by Councilor Shinya?
I'll say that the planning board and the inspectors, when we met on this issue, thought that the reason the state did what they did was to have more permanent housing than short-term rental. We thought that the idea was that you weren't supposed to rent a room for a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. The idea was to create housing. And so a longer-term duration was more in line with what the state desired for housing. That was our thought, or at least that's the way I took the planning board's decision to leave this in there so that there wasn't a short-term rental and a constant turnover in a particular address.
If I may, I don't know if everyone's aware, but when the state did put the mandate in the model bylaws, in that when they came forward with the ADUs, they did that under the Dover Amendment. That basically, there are certain sections under there that basically make it that the town cannot regulate. And I think the intention of the Commonwealth was to leave specifically up to the local municipality the right to regulate short-term rentals. When we talked to the building departments, Ted and Mike, at our meetings, and we looked at the pros and cons, we determined that an ADU, the intention wasn't to create a transient community within a residential neighborhood, in a single-family neighborhood, having different people renting for short-term rental back and forth. So the intent of the ADU bylaw was not for short-term rentals, and that's why, if it was, they would have made it as part of their mandatory requirement like they did on most of the other parts of the regulations.
Councilor Shan?
My reading of the regulation, they left that particular item up for a local option of whether to allow it or not allow it. And I felt that if the state wanted to regulate the short-term rentals, they would have wrote it into the original guidance that was given to the local planning boards. In their guidance, it says that it's a local option. It's one of the very few things that they allow the local option to change. And I just look at it as being somebody with fairness. If somebody has a family member that moves in there and should die and leave the apartment vacant, and they wanted to do a short-term rental, for example, Harrington Hospital or Prime, the Amazon building, coming in and do it, using it as a short-term rental. We have other areas in towns that is allowable, that does it. And I think restricting that to the people that are deciding to go with ADUs, not allowing them, I think, is unfair to the property owner. I know the intent is to bring somebody like myself going and move in with family would be reasonable. But if I was to die later on in life and my family member decided they wanted to rent it out, they're allowed to rent it out long-term, but if they wanted to do a contract with the hospital or something like that, I think we should have the ability to do that as other properties have in town. So that's my reasoning behind it.
Councilor?
I would tend to agree with the planning board members. I think the intent is to provide housing for people that are displaced, and just being familiar with this issue in other places and seeing how it exacerbates the issue of homelessness when people are incentivized to just do short-term rentals to make money and not really providing, a longer rental period for people in our community that need those, that need those apartments. So I would not be in favor of doing the short-term rental. I think we should probably give this an opportunity to see how that helps our community in really getting people into apartments that might be on the street otherwise.
If I may respond, the ADU law that was done wasn't to fix homelessness. If you read what it was to be able to help family members come in and do those kind of things. It wasn't just put together for homelessness. And sometimes a short-term rental for homelessness helps that person get on his feet and move on to bigger and better housing situations. So again, that was my intent, was to help everybody. And that's why I support this. That's all I have.
And
Rebuttal, and then we'll go to Councilor.
well, the only other point is that it's for a period less than 31 days. So if it's 5 weeks, it's allowable. If it's just under 31 days, is what they would say to be short-term rental.
Can I just tag on
Go ahead.
to David? On the, also, the ADU, Airbnb is a short-term rental, and that is allowable in another part of our zoning. So the intention was to create a housing unit, more housing units, because to bring the cost down. When there's more housing units available, it helps with the affordability to bring the cost down. So that was the intention of the ADU bylaw, is to create more housing units for that purpose.
Council Marquetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. Mr. Loyne said that there were some pros and some cons to allowing short-term rental. Could you tell me what the pros and the cons are?
Well, I think it was probably majority cons. That number one is you have a residential neighborhood. You single-family zone. You have a detached garage that might have a second floor or something. You create an ADU in that parcel. Now, if you have short-term rentals, you have different people coming in maybe every 2 days, 3 days. You're basically running a lodging room in a single-family zone when you have a short-term rental like that. And that was the issue. The pros, I think, was that it would be some additional income if needed, and that was a pro. But the cons totally outweighed that, especially to keep the character of a neighborhood. And I think that's when I think the majority of the board, if not all the board, felt that that was the most important thing. The ADU bylaw, if we had a way, we would actually put a few more sections and restrictions into it, but the state has mandated that we do it this way. And by doing it this way, I think we're protecting the existing neighborhoods in this town by not allowing the short-term rentals.
What type of people are you thinking are going to come into these short-term rentals that you don't think would be good for the neighborhood?
You could have anybody come into short-term rental. I mean, you could look at the perfect scenario that it's a elderly couple that just wants to come to town for 3 days. That's a great thing. But then you can have someone that has malicious intent that is looking to come here, do something. You don't know who your short-term rental is. Just like like a hotel or motel in Sturbridge. You often go by, you do see police there and so forth, because there is people, transient type people, that would want to try to stay off the grid and could look at this as an opportunity. And we felt that the transient clientele in the neighborhood, and not only that, it's the traffic, the additional traffic in the neighborhood. You don't know if they're going to come with one car, two car. At least long term, it's set up where we do have parking requirements. The transient's a little bit harder to control and make sure that everything is being done properly.
But wouldn't somebody that wants to come into a neighborhood with some bad intentions, they could come anyway, couldn't they? Couldn't they go sleep in the woods if they wanted to?
They could, but know what? You would. Yeah, you can come up with any scenario like that, but
Okay, but if they're in a house, an ADU, at least you know who they are, correct? You are tracking them, you know that this is the person living here, so if anything happens, you know where to find them, who they are.
I don't think there's any tracking on it. There's no tracking anywhere. I mean,
If somebody's renting a house, you know that there's somebody in there, correct? Somebody would know, I would think.
Could I add, I think, to go to one point that Mike made, which might help illustrate a little bit how we thought about it. Anyone can take an ADU and then turn it into an Airbnb if they wish to under our bylaws. So if someone wants to use the ADU as an Airbnb, they can. We have a special permit process set up for that. So I think our thought, again, to go to Mike's point, was they're two separate things. The ADU is allowed by right. It doesn't require those steps maybe of the special permit. So there is a differentiation between the two. So maybe it starts out as an ADU. You could build it by right, but there is that ability to turn it into an Airbnb if you wish to. So we didn't see the need to create the ADU like the Airbnb, if there's already a pathway there to make it one if you so choose.
So do Airbnbs, do they usually rent for more than 30 days?
Sometimes, they could, yeah.
But
There's some
usually
people-
they're less than 30 days, wouldn't you
Usually
agree?
they're less, yeah, they're more like hotels.
So you're basically cutting out Airbnbs, because usually they rent for less than 30 days. More times, I would think, than somebody longer than that,
I
6
w-
months or so, or...
I would think that if people, I think we'd see an increase in Airbnb opportunities if we allowed ADUs here, because people would then have a structure or a building that they would then say, you know what, I want to actually turn this into an Airbnb. So I see your point, but I don't think it would be that ADUs not allowing short-term rental would necessarily equal Airbnbs reducing. If anything, I think it would increase Airbnb opportunities in our area because people would take their ADUs and go through the process to be a special permitted Airbnb.
So
But
your
that's-
main intention is to get more housing for people to bring the cost of housing down, correct? Then why do we not allow mobile homes? Wouldn't that help solve the problem?
Well, I personally, yeah, I
I
can't
personally would,
answer that. Don't have a problem with that, but
I personally think mobile homes have a certain place for characters of the neighborhood and so forth. And I would personally be against mobile homes unless it was in a designated area. I wouldn't have a problem with a special permit in a small mobile, like a park like Sturbridge has the elderly community. I wouldn't have a problem with that. But I think intermixing mobile homes into wood structure or residential existing residential neighborhoods, I think it would ruin the character of the neighborhoods.
But you do think mobile homes would help bring down the cost of rent,
They
correct?
could, yeah, they could.
So why hasn't the planning board done anything about that? Put a certain area of town where you could have a mobile home. You've never done anything about that.
We have in our provisions of a bylaw, we have a provision for an open space community where you can, if someone came to us, and we could look at that.
Well, I thought I
There-
saw in your regulations specifically saying no mobile homes.
Is that in a use chart?
There is.
It is in a use chart.
we can take a look at that.
So
I-
why doesn't the planning board take that up then? If you want to bring down the cost of
I
rent
think
in
it's
this
a different
town.
issue. We're talking about ADUs, not,
Well, you're the one who
mobile
said you
homes.
want to bring down the cost of living in this town.
But the
Cost of
thing is, I
rent.
think the ADU is what's in front of us as the agenda. I think that discussion on the mobile home park, I think you're both on the same page. I don't want it in my neighborhood, but I would love to see a park like Kelly Park. But that's something that a developer would have to come in, identify it, go to the planning board and knock the tin on it till they got something that fits in the area and doesn't drag the values down in the actual people that built homes in their neighborhoods. And I think one of the things you bring out on the short term, and I'm having a tug of war because the hotel theory, I'm not sure I want that
in a
in a residential area where, you would have this turnover quickly. I mean, again, there's a lot to think about here. I mean, again, I commend the planning board on working on this, but it's like anything else. We're gonna work on it as a council and see where it brings us.
Well, I'm
Councilor
not-
Shinya, you had
as
your-
long as I still have the floor, I'll just
Oh, I'm
finish up.
sorry. Go ahead.
I don't have any problem with Councilor Shenyer's suggestion because I think that they're just playing games here. Oh, you can go 31 days, but you can't go less than 31 days. If you're going to have short-term rental, you're going to have short-term rental. 32 days, or you can have it. 31 days or less, you can't have it. Just open it up, and I would have to agree with Councilor Shenyer. I'm all set.
I'm
Thank
gonna
you.
go over to Councilor Kelly and then I'll go to Councilor Shinya.
Do we, I don't know the zoning code inside and out, unfortunately, but do we regulate short-term rentals in this town now? For any other part, for condominiums, for housing? Okay, so I guess my concern would be, because my understanding of the ADU law is that it is supposed to be least restrictive regulation. All right, so we're going to carve out a restriction for short-term rentals simply for ADUs and not for the rest of the housing inventory. I'm not sure that we can even do that, because as I read the ADU law, we can do short-term rentals subject to the town's regulations on short-term rentals. So if we had short-term rentals, if we had regulations on short-term rentals, then we could apply those to ADUs. But I don't think we can just carve out an exception for ADUs. So, I mean, if the town wants to consider regulations or restrictions on short-term rentals, I mean, that's something we can consider. But I don't think we can just carve out an exception for ADUs.
All right, 3 times.
Thank you.
Councilor Senior.
That was one of my comments I was going to make regarding the fact that we don't have regulations. The thing that concerns me is when they say that no mobile homes are allowed and those type of things, they are allowed, as long as they're affixed to a foundation and they're serviced by an independent water line, sewer line, utility structure, whether it's tied into the existing home or they bring it into the town street. Somebody could go out and purchase a tiny home and put it on an ADU lot as long as you meet certain conditions. And the ADU law was designed to make it restrictive to the towns because of the fact that people don't want them. Members, and that was a concern of the planning board getting together and saying, we don't want ADUs in our neighborhood. But if you go across street and you've got a 3-family home and you want to turn it into an Airbnb, that's okay. But if you go to Glover Street, for instance, and it's a single-family home, no, you're not. We don't want it in that neighborhood. And I think that's the intent of the law, was to prevent planning boards and councilors and those kind of things to restrict in neighborhoods. Now, I know at one time the planning board was considering not allowing like an ADU in a general business zone. My understanding of the law is if the single-family home is allowed in the general business home, an ADU could go there. Now, if they wanted to build a single-family home, I don't know how that works, but if there's a pre-existing single-family home in general business, commercial, industrial, they have the right to put that ADU there. And speaking with Teddy, the tiny houses are allowed as long as you're affixed to a foundation and service a mobile home. My mobile home in Florida was brought in. The wheels were taken off, the hitch was taken off, and it was mounted to a foundation. The difference that people don't want mobile homes is they don't pay property tax like you would on a home. You pay land tax. You could develop a tiny home community in this town, and it would be allowable because it's affixed to a foundation and it pays property tax like you and I, but they're valued much lower. And that's what people's concerns are. I mean, if you look at the bylaw, it'll say recommendations when it goes, and odds are it's not going to go before the planning board, but they make recommendations about ADUs, minimizing trees, vegetation, soil removal, grade changes. Recommendation that the architect's style be compatible with the existing principal dwelling of the subject. The ADUs shall be serviced by adequate water and sewer or septic, and a plan shall demonstrate adequate parking as required. So those are if I were going to build an ADU, and let me straighten that out first too, because there's been many comments made that I'm building an ADU. I'm not building an ADU. My son's building an apartment in a S2 zone, which is allowable. And the reason for that is you can go bigger as long as you don't change the footprint and those kind of things. So putting that even in the bylaw, it's just recommendations. It's unenforceable. And that's the intent of the state. That's why the state made it so restrictive for towns and cities to, where you can't stop the ADUs. There's a way, so just, taking, it's like we're at a power struggle here. This is what we want, as a community. We don't want it in our neighborhoods, but we'll allow it in some neighborhoods. Parking. The parking, you allow one parking in the driveway, you have to have one parking spot. But if you live within a half a mile of the bus route, you park in the street. Well, the bus route in Southbridge is wherever the bus goes. If it comes on Dresser Street, it can go on Dresser Street. You don't need parking. If it goes on Main Street, a half a mile away from Main Street, you know what? That's a big portion of the whole community, because they go all the way up Main Street, they go up Worcester Street, and South Street. So, again, I've said enough.
I just like to comment. I'm not a big fan of Big Brother Boston mandating anything to the town of Southbridge, first of all. Second of all, we have a planning board I like working with the planning board as a subgroup, that they do control our neighborhoods. Not that I don't, I buy my land, I want to build a house, but I want my house value, my neighborhood, to hold some sort of character or a building style or something. I really do think, like when they built one of the marijuana stores, they had a lot of say over what was under special permit. We need our planning board to protect our neighborhoods. It's not like they're out there to hurt the neighborhood, but they're working towards local control through the planning board, recommending to the council. I never lose sight that I might disagree with sub-boards or other people, but the thing is, I respect everybody up here for the hard work that you put into it. I wish you had more say over it, and Boston had less say over it. But that's just a philosophical difference, which we can move on from here. But I really do think that when you hear from some of the planning board members, and I know a couple of them have been on for quite a while, they've seen the history of the town, what happens in these neighborhoods, how do you do it, how do you handle it and be fair. I commend the planning board, and sometimes I disagree with the planning board, because sometimes you can overregulate. I think there's a balance there, but the number one thing I think the planning board does is protect Southbridge from certain things that might hurt our neighborhoods or industrial areas, commercial areas. So going forward, I'm open-minded on this. I'm leaning towards the recommendation of Teddy Tatro, our building inspector, the assistant building inspector, the planning board. They're leaning in this direction for a reason. I don't know what the vote was planning board-wise.
Unanimous.
If it was unanimous, they're seeing something that, and don't get me wrong, as a council, I have so many things on the plate. It's amazing. But these are the things where you listen, why? And when I turn to my left and right, you have some experience here when you say why. And the other members, with all your input, I have to go along with the planning board that you should regulate it in some way. It shouldn't just be an open spectrum where you just run through and everything's okay, don't worry about it. Then you have the neighbors complaining. What do you do with that complaint? So going forward, I think, again, I want to open it back up to the planning board and the council to see, is there anything else that you see here?
One thing, just so everyone is aware, the state has mandated that an ADU is allowed in any zone where a single-family residential unit is allowed. We're not changing that. And in our bylaw, if a single-family residential house is allowed in an industrial zone by special permit, guess what? That house, single-family house, can add an ADU to their properties. So we're not changing anything that the state is mandating to us. We're not restricting it more than the state is mandating us to do. I think that everyone should know that that's what we looked at. I mean, originally, you were right. We did not want to see ADUs added to the two-family and three-family zones, because can you picture a three-family triple-decker type house and then a small shed in the backyard in a real dense populated area, in a small shed in the backyard turned into an ADU. Now you're adding more density to that neighborhood and could cause more safety concerns also for access, egress, and so forth. So we looked at all the issues. Not only we looked at public safety issues, we looked at egress issues, we looked at parking issues, and so forth. But I mean, if we had our way, 3-family zones probably wouldn't have ADUs because of a situation like the density that I spoke of. But I mean, we've got to look at a happy medium, and that's where we came up with our recommendations for the bylaw.
And
John.
what you see here that on the yellow is what's been approved by the Attorney General. She went through it, and we modified what was advertised in 3 sections. One of them, we said at least 1 off-street parking. We took the least off it, so it's now 1 off-street parking space. Mr. Shenya's right, that a half mile from the bus stop, our bus stop is a flag stop, so anywhere half a mile from wherever you can stop the Worcester bus, though there is a route that they do go on, a half mile from that route, wherever it is, you don't need to have a parking spot, but if it's outside of that, you have 1 parking spot. And we've also said that if it's a pre-existing non-conforming use and it's a single-family dwelling in those zones, then they can have an ADU. We've made sure that we've attached this to the plan 760 CMR 71 as amended now and then. However, the state wants to amend it, this bylaw passes that and stays with it.
Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the planning board members, all right, let me start here. If I want to start an Airbnb, are there parameters that I need to present to the planning board to get the special permit? Or do I just walk up to you and say, I'm going to put one in, and you say, okay, and then I put it in?
I would say it would be a special permit probably that you would apply for. And
It's in the use table.
yeah, take a look at it if you want. Pick it up. The actual.
Go ahead.
Yeah, if I can answer that question. Short-term rentals are included in our use table. They're allowed in R1, R2, R3, and Central Core through special permit, and not allowed in other districts. And they would go through a similar special permit process to other special permits with plans included and a presentation to the planning board.
Thank you.
Okay, so then someone correct me if I'm wrong, please, I stand to be corrected. There are already methods in place which are somewhat regulated in terms of offering the opportunity for a resident of the town of Southbridge to create a short-term rental opportunity.
Correct.
Okay, so if it's already in place, then why do we need to delete what's there?
Because, if I may, what's here, it specifically says ADUs may not be used as short-term rental. It specifically says that.
For an ADU.
For an ADU.
But if I were to apply for, so then suppose I own an ADU, can I apply for a special permit and use that facility as my Airbnb?
I just said no.
Why not?
Not as
Where does it say that in this regulation?
In the regulation.
In the regulation, it says that it may not be used for short-term rental, ADU specific.
Oh, an ADU.
An ADU in the short term says it cannot be used for short-term rentals. Now, if you added a
If it's
provision in
classified
there,
as an ADU, would it be, maybe I'm thinking too black and white about it, but if it's built and classified as an ADU, but then could someone take an ADU, go through the special permit process and turn it into an Airbnb?
if it said that in here, I would say yes, but it doesn't
Okay.
say that.
So you're saying maybe if there was language in there that indicated there was a pathway for someone to turn it
I'm
into?
agreeable to that.
Okay.
My concern is what was brought up by the planning board, which is basically the idea of transients and transient movement within the neighborhood. I have to say that I agree with Councilor Lazo that we have a fine board of Southbridge citizens that have been in this business for a long time. And I would hope, and I believe that they know what they're doing, not only the planning board, but the building inspectors that we have in town. I have the utmost faith and confidence in them. And if there is a pathway in place for people to create short-term rentals that are somewhat regulated, then I would want to stay with what we've got as being offered by the planning board.
Councilor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. I think the issue here is whether or not you can go beyond what we've already determined are short-term, proper short-term rental uses for other dwellings. And apparently there is something in our zoning code that does allow for short-term rentals upon obtaining a special permit. I don't think you can carve out an exception and have a more restrictive provision for short-term rentals of ADUs. I think they can be subject to any restrictions that we have for other properties or for other dwellings, but I don't know that we can go beyond what we already have in place for other dwellings and say we can't have short-term rentals of less than 31 days. So if that doesn't apply across the board to other short-term rentals. So I think that's a concern, because as the statute reads, it says you can have short-term rentals subject to restrictions under General Law, Chapter 64G, Section 14. So if we have restrictions that we've put in place already on other dwellings, then we can apply those to ADUs. But if we don't have those restrictions on other dwelling units, then I don't think we can make an exception and apply a more strict short-term rental clause for ADUs.
If you may. We did look at, in fact, Ted Tatro and Mike have been to many seminars, and state put on sponsorship to try to teach them about the ADUs. And the state left that provision in here for the towns to determine if they want to allow short-term rentals or not. And as a board, we've determined that we did not want to allow short-term rentals as the reasons that I stated earlier.
You have the floor.
Hi. Well, regarding Mike's comment, I felt pretty strongly when we started debating and deliberating over this that we were discussing ADUs as a more or less long-term residence, maybe even permanent for some people, like elderly grandparents or a young couple who were saving money to start their own establishment. So that I think there's a difference between ADUs and short-term. And I think what we have created or designed, I think, fits what I thought we were doing.
Councilor?
I'm just curious about the actual language around short-term rentals in other areas of town. What is the language for, like, let's say a three-family or or a duplex or different zones? Is it the same language across the board?
As I understand, we don't currently have more language within the zoning bylaw that gives us more specific definition based on the zone. It's just a defined entity, and it's included in the use table.
And is it by special permit specifically in those?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any further discussion by council or planning board? If not, there is nobody from the public here today. I would just like to take the minute to thank the planning board for your work on this. We'll move it up to council for any discussion, amendments, and approval. If there's any other information that we should know, please forward it to the town manager so we can have it in the packet for the councilors. And I would like to thank, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, to the town manager, do we, as a planning board, because the way the bylaw, do we have to vote as a planning board to remand this officially back up to the council because of the public hearing process? What I understood in the past, we didn't do a joint meeting, joint public hearing like this in the past. That usually in the past, it went up to the town council, they remanded it back down to the planning board to hold a special hearing, or hold a public hearing. And then from that public hearing, that we would vote to send it back up to the council for the three readings and deliberation. So do we have to make this legal, do a vote of the planning board? I think we do.
I would think I think you take input from the public hearing. The law, the guidance from KP Law is that town councils can hold a joint hearing to hear all comments at that time. You take that comment back. I would assume that the planning board could take those comments back and then take action to refer back. I'd have to research that.
I think, to be on the safe side, I think the planning board should take a motion to close, for one thing, close the public hearing, and then...
When we close the hearing, if you go back to your board and vote to recommend to the council...
Correct.
That's the way I would do it.
That's the way I would do it, too.
And the thing is, at that point, at that time there, you've got the public input, and then after they would recommend to the council, and then we would deal with it when it comes in front of us.
I believe that's what we did with the marijuana one, when we did, because we did the joint
I think
hearing
we
for
did
the
a vote.
marijuana.
I think we did a separate vote. If I remember,
I believe we closed the public hearing, all public comment was taken, went back down to planning
board voted, then...
They sent it back up to town council for the three readings and the final.
Right. Sandra?
According to 40A, we are required to vote to recommend
Right.
one way or the other to you.
Most sub-boards all recommend it to council with a vote. So today we're gathering the information, we all getting it. I like the volley between council and planning board to understand better, because the planning board, I mean, what do we want to be when we grow up type of attitude as a town? We talk about commercial and all these other things. Here's a thing in front of us that was mandated, force-fed from Boston. So let's deal with it. We'll catch it, we'll work on it, and then we can get it through and see what happens. Councilor Shinyon.
Mr. Chair, to you. So this would go back to the planning board.
Correct.
For their review, in consideration that they might want to add, let's say, to the part of the short-term rental, if they wanted to change what they have here, then that would come back to us.
I don't know if they can do any changes without having it at a full...
I was thinking that we've already been through all this.
Right.
I think it would be
Correct.
taking a vote tonight right here to officially recommend this back to the council.
I just don't think you can do it at a public hearing. You have to have your meeting posted for your vote.
Point
We have a
of
posted meeting.
order.
This is a posted meeting.
I don't think they could hold a vote
It's not
tonight.
posted as a planning board meeting. It's posted as a public hearing, which is just input coming in, no votes taken.
Yeah, there's no agenda items to take a
Right,
vote,
there's no vote.
so it's just a
Okay.
public hearing.
So that's why I don't think it's really...
No, you're totally correct. I thought it was
You know what I'm
posted,
saying?
I thought it was posted as a planning board, had a posting and the selectmen, and it was a joint hearing. No, you're totally correct on that.
It is posted as a public hearing, but there's no agenda item to take a vote,
Right.
to take action.
It's a joint meeting, but it's a joint public hearing.
No problem. You're totally correct.
Anything
on that.
else? If not, I thank you very much. I will formally close the public hearing, and planning board, you'll have a recommendation for the council.
Correct.
Thank you.